can go ahead whenever, Kayla. Alright, so workshop. Who's gonna take the lead? Dan?
So this is follow-up to the last discussion we had around enrollment. I believe that the forecasted enrollment at our last meeting had a, I think the most aggressive one was 28, increase of 28, and it was requested that we provide some more examples. And so Dan Ballard developed, changed around some of the inputs, and so I think we've got a flat 15 plus, 30 plus, and 51, something like that. So for the board to consider, what are the ramifications of setting a number and missing it, which we've done? What are the ramifications of setting a real conservative number? How does that all play out? And so this will kick into gear once we have a number that we can get a little more robust about, starting to build a revenue package around it and an expenditure package.
Yeah, that's basically, Dan kind of encapsulated it as we went, what had been brought forth previously was a plus 31, kind of as what I thought was the most likely scenario, and the board had asked for some additional scenarios, so sharing one that's more aggressive would be a plus 53.1, and then two that I had to come up with that really were kind of think outside the box a little bit, and one is actually where you could see the situation of the district actually decreasing in enrollment next year. I think that that's highly unlikely, but the driver of that would be is just a zero growth. You're just moving all these classes through the system. The biggest driver of this whole thing is your 10-11. Is you have a very large 10th grade class at 162.4 this year, but your survival rate for 11 and 12 is very poor. Your survival rate from going to 10 to 11 is only 70%, just a little over 70%. So if you take that large class of 162, but say only 70% of those are going to survive, that's a significant number of kids that are going to go out. Think about it this year as you've got, a much smaller class. So that if all those things were to happen, all those very negative scenarios were to happen, all of those kids continue to, in that large class, migrate out into other programs, there's a potential that your high school that you could decline next year. Okay, that is a possibility. Is that, again, you've got a very large 10th grade class. And if 30% of those kids go elsewhere, that's a pretty big number. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is just basically rolling up the numbers plus a 2% growth at TK through 9th grade, plus 2%, and then using the cohort again at 9 through 12. High school is always kind of the wild card as far as what's going to happen. And again, speaking on that 11th and 12th grade, how many of those kids are you going to retain? How many of those kids are going to seek other options outside of the district? And we've noticed that increasing. I mean, it has about 5% per year there, where we're getting more kids are seeking other opportunities outside of our walls for 11th and 12th grade.
So part of that, if you look at that, K through 9, we're growth. We have a surplus of students each year. We're growing more than our previous. We had a very large exit to running start this year, the largest class ever. So how much does that happen or not? And some of that is a function of the courses we offer at Sultan High School. Some of it is a function of kids wanting to get a head start, but it's been growing here to have more kids go to running start.
Well, we also need to take into account the change in the schedule,
Absolutely.
So we don't know what that's
Right.
gonna be
That's
like, having the
complete
more
new
day.
thing that we just
Are we
don't
gonna have
know.
more kids because they like that, or are we gonna not?
Hard to say.
So I think of the four scenarios, I think the yellow one is the most likely at the plus 31.5. Next most likely would probably be the blue one at 12.6. Third would be kind of probably the orange one at 53.1, and the least likely would be the decline, if I had to rate the four. But you're right, we've got some other wild cards. Again, we talked about kids moving to other opportunities, but in a brand new schedule. at the high school too. And does that help attract more kids to stay and provide more opportunities to where they don't look elsewhere or not? We don't know yet. This is gonna be our first year. The other thing that leads me to believe is that number is pretty reasonable. As you can see, that our increase versus the prior year is 92.5. I know I mentioned this before. So at 31, you're only saying you're gonna grow about a third of what you've demonstrated that you've grown over the last 12 months. So I think that that's a pretty conservative number. We've got a large development, up here, Stone Ridge, that they're talking about at 170 homes. Things continue to grow. We're not seeing signs that things are slowing down. And so projecting a number that is essentially 1/3 of what we've seen as actual growth over the last 12 months, I think is a pretty conservative number.
So what I would also say to the board is that you don't have to pick any of those numbers.
No.
You can say, I think 20 is a number I'm comfortable with. I used to look at this before we were really growth oriented, and I would say, okay, what month the previous year, regardless of cohort survival, regardless of any of that, if I was to pick April or March or May, which month would translate to about where we start? And I think going back a few years, it was like the month of April. That enrollment seemed to have some, as it's become much more complicated here, we actually used a demographer because it's just complicated. It costed us one impact fee to do it. And Chris is familiar with them, he's used them. So you do your best to figure out a mathematical landing spot, but you don't have to adhere to any of those numbers.
Well, if we just look at these four numbers, which one are you most comfortable with out of these four?
I think Dan's
Same
the
as
31.
the yellow.
I guess the other way to say is, let's say that we have zero growth. What kind of, because you would think you would build an enrollment around 31. And so if you do 31 times about 11,000, what kind of money is that? That would be what you would miss if you missed it.
So we grew 92.5,
Which is
correct?
the prior year, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that's your 23-24 ending number versus 24-25 through 7 months.
That's 341,000.
So,
Can we talk about consequences? Like consequences. I don't wanna derail you if that's
No.
coming up.
nope,
We have to
that's
give
pretty
extra
much,
money back.
that's,
We just gotta pay it back, which we did last year, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we revamped our numbers and eliminated 80.
So last year we expected fewer students, so we,
We grew a lot more
whatever
this
you
year.
wanna
Went
call
really
it with the
conservative.
a lot
staff.
more.
Yeah,
So if
went
we go
really
conservative and we end up having more students, then
You gotta hire-
we miss out on hiring teachers at the beginning of the year, like might have larger class sizes, and on the other hand, if we say we're gonna have, too many and then we don't, then you have to lay people off. So it's,
well, there's two things. So, yeah, Gigi is correct, but keep this in mind. Yes, the standard thought is if you make your enrollment too restrict, too conservative, then yes, you're delaying payments, you possibly constrict you as far as cash in making hirings at the beginning of the year. However, based on where we're gonna end this year, I think cash is not gonna be a huge problem. You're not gonna be super strapped going into early fall as you're waiting for that November or for that fall tax collection. And second of all is you can always, as we did before, where we dialed it back, you can reach out to OSPI and you can revise that budget number and turn that spigot on sooner as opposed to waiting for January. You don't have to wait for January. You can reach out to OSPI and say, we'd like to revise those budget projections. We saw just boatloads of kids show up and we'd like to open that spigot up. Where we did it the opposite way before, where we had over projected, we reached out to OSPI and we said that we wanna close the spigot off a little bit, slow the flow of money down so that the adjustment is not so significant in January. So you can moderate that. You can open it up or you can dial it down kinda as you need to.
Any chance of only giving an education to people who make reservations? No, okay.
It's not camping, no.
Considering what happened last year, I'm almost more interested in trending up and overestimating and then letting people go when we find out what real numbers are.
Well, if you overestimate, that means that you have to potentially give money back, and that's where we were
Yeah.
last year, we potentially had to let people go. Because we didn't have the money, we had to cut our budgets and tighten our budgets up last year. That was the issue last
We
year.
were
So I'm missing, cause I came in like right at the
113
tail end when we were hiring people back. I thought we underestimated the number of students who were gonna be
No, we
on.
We thought there'd be more kids from the new development and there wasn't.
Yeah,
that
this
many.
year we're
We
above
over-
If you drive up
projection.
there
That's
now,
not
there's tons of
this
little
year.
ones. This year we
We're talking about last year.
Yeah,
Okay, so
23-24.
this
Yes.
year,
This year we underestimated
okay.
and we grew more.
we were
Last
conservative.
year-
Okay, so you guys last year went through that, which was better, man, cause this year seemed rough.
Laying off office staff and librarians.
actually lay them
really
off.
Well,
They were given notice.
This year, I think.
they were given
I don't
notice
care
and
what
they
you
were
call it.
upset.
Whatever you wanna call it, people were told they probably wouldn't be coming back. Which was worse, this year or last year?
This was better this year.
This was better.
This was better.
We
re-
overplanned by
We
hundred
got
and
about
thirteen last year.
700,000 or 800,000 additional dollars after January
But then we have principals begging for
staff.
staff.
But,
Yeah.
so that, it was better for our stress, but the staff was we were understaffed.
I like the middle
I
of the
like having
road,
staff
like-
there, cause we're gonna have teachers leave, cause they're so burnt out.
I mean, ideally, you like to hit it pretty close to
Short term.
right on accurate.
Oh.
That's the
Of
perfect
course,
scenario.
everyone would like.
If you're within
I'd love
5 to
estimate.
10, that's kind of the sweet spot that you always try to shoot for. And we have, over the 13 years I've been here, we've had years where we've hit it pretty darn close. We've had years where we've been well short, we've had years where we've been well long, as far as that number is concerned. We've seen both of those scenarios over the past 2 years. The other thing too is obviously as you put revenues into the budget, that generates what you anticipate your estimated ending fund balance is going to be, and we will bring you a budget that will estimate the ending fund balance being at least 4%, which is minimum fund balance policy. So if you make a projection that is too restrictive, obviously it makes it harder to get to that 4% ending fund balance number too. So they play off of each other. You know, the more conservative you are, the more difficult it makes bringing forth an approvable budget. If you are a little too aggressive, you have the potential of overestimating your revenues and then having to take corrective action during the year also too. So there's,
So you asked me, Gigi, if I was to pick a number, I would pick 25. And the reason I pick 25 is it gives you a little room to work, but if you miss it, assuming you miss it about a 0, it's not gonna kill you. You have some budget to work with. We have tried to, when we got into going 60 over or 80 over, we've almost never seen that work. And part of it is this whole business of predicting this is pretty fickle. And so that's why we used a demographer one time, because they came and interviewed city people. They went into the birth rates, not just in the state, but right here where we're at. They did stuff that we don't do to predict the enrollment. And to see if there was a way to get a little more information. They tried to figure out, they took an average of, in the sample of the homes, how many kids in various age spans are living in these and projected it out. Stuff that gives you kind of a step more than what we do. It's more complex and you have, one building permit's paying for it.
so if we went with just a flat number, obviously probably in the case of 25, what I would typically do is, because you do get funded differently based on grade span, but if you did a number like 25, I probably would just take and increase it by 2 at each grade level, and just for simplicity purposes, that's 26 if you did 2 at each grade.
Can you quickly just go through how you came up with the numbers in yellow?
The numbers in yellow, yeah, so I would take the
Sounds
20, the 25, 26 estimate, I'm taking current year and prior year average as far as the cohort, which averaged out to a 1.6% growth. So you're to the right in the gray, to the right of the blue column says, what was the survival from the prior year? So I'm taking the most completed numbers, which would be current year 24-25 cohort survival and 23-24 cohort survival. So I'm taking the most completed year plus our current year and averaging them together. Because you can see your survival rates are different depending on year. Like, let's look again, we'll talk about the 11th, and let's just look at 11th and 12th again, because it's the most stark. 11th grade in 23-24, your survival was 76.7%. This year it's 70.6%, so it's dropped over 5% between those 2 years. Same thing with 12th grade, it was 84.9% last year, it's 80%. So in both those grades, you've seen a 5% decline. So what you're doing in that scenario, you're averaging those two things. You're saying, we don't think it's gonna be another 5%, but it's gonna maybe 2.5 to 3%, because it's been 5%, we're gonna hedge here a little bit. It's still gonna be down, but we don't think it's gonna drop as precipitously as it has over the past year. So that's kind of what we did. We're trying to mitigate a completed year versus a current year and merge them together. Where the most aggressive one basically just says, we're taking the current year numbers and we're going with those, because those are even higher, and so that makes a more aggressive projection.
Chris, is there any input you wanna throw out there?
I mean, I don't know enough yet about the class size numbers in the contract and how close we'd be pushing up against those to do that. And what you're like, I think the danger of overstaffing is tends to be more painful than being able to come in and say, we're able to add some support because we have some capacity. It allows you to be responsive in a positive way, as opposed to
Lay off people.
holy moly,
Yeah.
what are we gonna have to do to fix this? You know, it'll be interesting. Flow Analytics does a good job of talking to different people. Families, from what I've seen, are not having as many children as historically in our country. So when they look at housing developments where they used to be able to predict 2 to 3, 4 kids, it's like, is it really 2? Is it even 2? And so, and with the schedule change, right, it could go either way. So I would say somewhere between 25 and 30 is probably okay, because it gives you the ability to see some. I know when I talk to the high school students, they'd like to see more college and the high school classes on campus where they're more connected to kids.
That'll change some of what we're seeing here.
All these, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
All these numbers are predicting growth, right? Even the most conservative one. So we're not looking at cutting staff regardless.
Most
Even if-
conservative is 20 down.
Yeah, the 20 down,
Oh,
but again, I
20
think that one's
down.
the least likely,
Yeah,
the least likely.
Yeah.
I was
that's
just
not
charged with bringing some additional scenarios, so I was kind of thinking outside the box a little bit on that one,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
So whether it's a pattern or not, if you go all the way back, you unhide all of your cells, go back to 2014.
Mhm.
Grow, flat, grow, flat, grow, flat. I mean, it's consistent. You take out the COVID years.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
very, very consistent. One year you go up 110 students, the next year you're flat or maybe even negative.
But that doesn't take into account, cause there wasn't the building that we have now back then, was there? Just cause the new developments are,
We had a
You had Eagle
year,
Ridge, you had other things that were coming in.
we had a year where we grew by 100 and there really wasn't a development.
Yeah.
It was just,
People
you know,
moving out.
out of the blue.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to figure out.
So I just,
5, 6 years ago.
if we go too far, we know how everybody felt last time when we were trying to skinny our staff down.
That sucked.
I think it's gonna be harder if you skinny staff down or try to remove people than it is to bring in, like Chris said, enhance. If we can react quickly, it's a horrible situation, but there's probably gonna be a little bit of an influx of teachers in the area with some of the schools closing down and some of the problems. So in years past, the teacher situation was probably tighter, where now it might be a little bit more plentiful out there.
So, and anything you do in the fall is gonna be heavier burden on your hourly employees to resolve, because you can't reduce certified staff after May 15th.
Yeah.
So that's where the office staff and that becomes,
The target.
they bear the brunt of any late changes. And that's the primary area where you can see savings, and they're usually the backbone.
well, and if we're looking at, like, if we just take
Support.
these 4 numbers, I'm most comfortable with the yellow, the 31. I don't think that we're gonna lose kids.
No.
And I also am too scared to say we're gonna grow 53 kids. I'm comfortable like the 25 to 31-ish area.
That's also my comfort level.
Am I misunderstanding what people are saying? It sounds like it's better to under-predict and hire more in the fall.
Then overpredict and have to give money back to the state.
Cause if
So then
And
why not
cut
fudge
people.
more towards the blue? I mean, I'm not saying 12, but like.
Because then you're
20.
really not gonna have enough
That,
staff.
yeah, that you're really committing.
Well,
towards.
look at this year as an example. I would like, and I think Chris and I would agree, but I don't wanna speak for him. you know, once we go through the massive work on getting a budget together, getting everybody in our matrix, and then at the end of the day, we start the school year and enrollment comes in, making sure that our K-3 class size, we have some tools to be able to address right away. Because we didn't really respond to this year's shortfall because last year it looked like we had quite a bit of capacity. And that's one of the reasons why I recommended that we just do it a little more on the conservative side, not knowing what's gonna happen. We have to be able to respond faster so that, you know, number one, you're getting funded at the full level, but even more importantly, you have a class at the kindergarten, first, second, or third grade level that is working with a reasonable number of kids. Cause the bottom line is right now, at Sultan Elementary School, we have more than 17 kids in those classes.
No, big time.
And it's a problem.
Yes, it is.
And so,
Dan, how close are the yellow numbers to being within current staffing based on the CBA? Like, are any of them teetering, like one or two more students would force you
Well,
to add an FTE, or?
I can tell you where we're at right now.
Okay.
Like right now, closing of March, we're at 25,000 in overload.
Okay,
Okay, very difficult to solve it because I can't just go hire one teacher and take that 25,000 away. It's like trading 100,000 for 25. There are very specific classes at the middle school that drive most of that. Health is one of them, there's a few other classes, meaning that the class size is, you know, maybe 28 is the cap and we have 31. And in a few of those classes, it's not a problem you can solve just by hiring one person.
So on this, and Kayla, I don't know, is this the actual Excel sheet? Can you just switch to this tab here? So obviously, it's a little bit, it's fairly easy when you have a district of our size, because we have only one middle school and one high school,
Right.
2 elementary schools.
Yeah.
So there's another tab that goes into these breakouts by anticipated class size purely based on the number of certificate instructional staff that are there. It isn't as sophisticated as the K-3 compilation because you're getting percentages of specialists and those other things. It's purely head count divided by number of certificated staff by grade span. And so that's what this is. It breaks into K-3 and then it also goes through, so these are your two buildings, Gold Bar and Sultan Elementary, and it goes through that. So we kind of try to say, how does this look? Based purely on this, it's advising that at Sultan Elementary, we would add 3 certificated staff next year and none at Gold Bar. Gold Bar is pretty flat, but based on what we're seeing, we're thinking to maintain K-3 ratio and keep class sizes reasonable, probably 3 additional certificated
That's
instructional
growth,
staff.
that's above where we are this year.
Right. So, and that's where, yeah, so scroll down just a little bit, Kayla, scroll over here, and then scroll down just a little bit. So, like in this case, they are currently at 30, and this would recommend 33 over here to the right, it's gonna go to 33 as far as certificated staff.
So what this, I mean, if you look at the number, the current head count's at 712, and the estimated head count next year is 710.
I'm sorry, Mike, where are you at?
So blue columns.
Oh, blue
Sultan
columns, okay,
Elementary.
yeah.
Yep.
So are we losing 2 students next year, so there's 0 growth in elementary?
You have got, what you wanna do is, like I said, this year, as we just talked about, we had some real challenges because our class sizes were getting so small. We reduced a kindergarten class, we had a kindergarten teacher that exited at the beginning of this year, that we did not replace that class at Sultan Elementary.
He's asking because it says current head count 712, estimated head count for next year 710.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
So are your,
3 teachers.
Well, we're adding 3 teachers.
Correct, to get those class sizes down. Now, again, some of these are challenging too. In this particular case, you've got 5 current, would be to go to 6, and at 6, it's gonna put you at 21. You have 6 currently, keep it at 6, would be at 21. 5, this would recommend to see if you can do a split. Again, this is purely mathematical, it's not saying that this is doable, but ideally you would have 5.5 teachers, 5.5 teachers to keep these. This is gonna still put you at 21, okay? That's still probably too high.
okay, but so the 712, 710.
That's the
You
question.
go to the next, but then you go to the next page and you're showing growth. Cause that's showing we're losing kids at Sultan Elementary.
And this is where I had
But then the
an
next
issue,
page,
but the next one, it shows that
shows
we are going
growth.
up.
The next one.
the next
The next
slide,
forecast district-wide.
Okay.
so you have your
It's actually-
actual,
It's actually fairly
Mhm.
flat still,
but it's up, it's not down.
on the
like, I mean,
forecast, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's, for me, I was like, all right, if the elementary forecast is actually flat, if you look at Gold Bar Elementary, we lose 3 students and we lose 2 at Sultan Fulton,
Mhm.
that's 5 students. So that's one of the reasons that I'm a little hesitant to say, okay, if we're going, are we reaching for 31, are we looking at flat? Then
Mhm.
you're saying we're gonna lose potentially 40 students going from 10th to 11th grade. So that's a swing of 45 students.
Mhm.
That's scary if we're predicting 31.
Mhm. Yeah, like I said, there's,
About 78 kids total.
if you get very flat, if you go, like you said, Mike, if it's this alternating year, growth year, flat year, growth year, flat year, we've been a flat year next year, if that pattern replicated itself. So you're right, I mean, that would put you towards a lower number, that 31 would be overly aggressive, given that.
Okay, so
But
hold on, we're saying that we're not gonna take a lot of growth for the high school, okay? So where is this growth then that cause you're saying we're losing kids in the elementary on this slide right here. But then the next slide, we're growing kids in the elementary, which is it?
Well, this one here ties to one of those columns, I'd have to go back and see which one it ties to. Click on this, like this cell right here, Kayla.
The number
Okay.
127,
Yeah, let's see here. It's not showing here.
forecast district-wide.
Well, you've got like current head count by grade, SES, 712.
Mhm.
And then you've got estimated head count, 710.
Uh-huh.
So you're estimating on this slide that we're gonna lose kids at SES.
Yeah, based
But
on
then
that.
when you go to the forecast district-wide,
we're growing.
we're growing.
But, so
Where is that growth then?
40 kids more going to the middle school next year, based on the 8th grade leaving, the 6th grade going in, or the 5th grade going in. So that's not necessarily growth, that's just moving through the system. This is where I would say the danger of just following the formulas and not stepping back and looking at, okay, that doesn't make sense. We're adding 3 teachers, but it's going down in enrollment 2 kids. You could make the argument that we were understaffed, that would cover part of it, but at the same time, this stuff's gotta match up.
Yeah, it's actually, right, between the two, it's in 31% on, the growth is not in the elementary. Because I just did an E-sub on both 31, it's 1068 and 1069, so it's within a student. So the growth, for the 31 more FTEs, I don't know where it is.
So the grade spans are on the other tab, the grade span totals are there also too. TKK 1 through 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12 are down in the bottom, these numbers here. This tells you how many in these columns is in each one here.
Yeah, that's what I say, I just E-summed those and it's 1,068.6
Okay.
for pre-K all the way through 5th grade.
So it looks like the growth you're projecting is in 6 through 8. From 465 to say if we did the
That would be the only place
Yellow.
growth is happening, based
Yeah.
on
would
this.
be,
Well, you still have big classes that are at the middle school, and you can see that your retention is greater than 100% at all of those classes. So 6th grade is a huge, or excuse me, 5th grade is a huge class. 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, they're all good, and your survival is north of 100% in every category.
so why don't we think we're gonna get more kids in elementary?
Well, one of the questions that's been answered, and I don't know how you factored this in, is it appears that transitional kindergarten will be set at the baseline, meaning we had 3 classes, we will be able to have 3 next year.
54, yeah, it still hasn't changed.
So that shouldn't have changed.
Right, 3 classes of 18.
I mean, I would need to know, I don't know the answer.
And we didn't lose any of those kiddos this year.
So Dan, is this just out of the formula you used that came up with 2 less, or where did that come from?
That's head count.
Well, head count's
That's
basically
estimated.
enrollment at the
They're
elementary
basically
level.
very good. Yeah, this is the counts, the head counts through April. I believe I've updated it through April. Click on that one, Caleb. Oh, no, this is just through February. This is through February. So this tells you how many head count you have by month, by grade, by building. And then this tells you the current head count by grade. Number of certificated instructional staff by grade. That gives your average by grade. And your estimated head count then is gonna tie back to this sheet here, one of the columns in that sheet.
What we've not been able to do very well is figure out exactly where the growth or whatever will happen.
It's 47 more additional kids and middle school
Middle school is
in
gonna
the
grow.
forecast than there is this year.
Yeah,
So-
and that's because of the large fifth grade class moving into two. Again, you've got, in your fifth grade, you've got a class of 187 compared to an eighth grade class of 152.
But if you're
That's
moving
exiting.
kids from one grade to the next grade, and that's not growth as a district, that is the same, so where is the growth? Cause that's not growth. Moving kids from fifth grade to sixth grade, that's not growing, that class is just moving on, and it's a big class.
Well, the yellow one
That's
has
not
an average
growth.
growth of 1.6% per grade on average. So again, you're taking your kindergarten class this year at 161, it's projecting that at 166.3 next year. 153 currently in first grade is gonna take you to 156.7. Second grade is currently 170, it's gonna take you to 176.7, so it's incremental by grade. So you're getting little bits in each grade span. Middle school is gonna grow because again, your reference is your fifth grade class relative to your eighth grade exiting class. Fifth grade entering class is 187.7. Eighth grade exiting class is 152. That's 35 kids different. You have a class that's 35 students larger coming in than is going out. So that's, middle school is gonna grow.
We care about that, hold on, we care about that, but our main goal today is how many new kids are we gonna grow? Not how many kids are going from one class to the other or one school to the other.
Correct.
Total enrollment numbers.
Correct.
Our student generated ratios are still pretty low from new development, from actual new kids that move into our district. If we look, it used to be McCormick, who's doing our SGR studies now, or is that part of Flow Analytics? Dan, do you know?
Flow did a comprehensive one
25.
as part of the, there's Sammamish Data Systems that has done some work. This is kind of our own, or Dan's own cohort survival. So the numbers are generated based on what is surviving from the classes before.
They're just pure mathematics. What was a first grader last year, how many matriculated to second grade,
Well,
second
we
grade
care
to third
about how many
grade.
kids we're gonna add as a whole. So Mike did some calculations, came up with 25. Dan had said he's comfortable with 25. Are you guys comfortable with 25? Cause we can go back and forth about who's this, that, and the other, but that's not helping us at all. So
Yeah.
are there questions about 25?
I'd wanna revisit, what we talked about as far as if we're flat and if we're adding FTEs, we need to go back and study that a little bit.
Okay.
When I was doing this last night, I went with 2%, but hearing everyone and all the numbers, you're right, it does go that step at a time, but 25 would be fine.
I'm good with the 1.6% yellow column of 31.5.
Michael?
I'm happier going low, I'm good with 25.
I think we're good with 25. Are you okay with 25?
Oh, yeah, I would
I mean, I'm-
always rather go conservative
I
than
think the 31 is probably the better
overinflate.
number, but I'll go with 25 because
Okay.
I think that.
Well, the 31 had math to support it and the 25 was just pulling a number out of the air,
He
but
did some math.
In
I'm
the scheme of
always gonna go more conservative.
six
as
students
good.
is not gonna make or break your
I know.
budget one way or the other.
I mean, even
I
at,
know, that's
like,
not even a full
I was thinking
class.
40, but 15 less that's a $250,000.
Okay, 25.
25,
25.
aggregate 25
25,
overall. Okay, I can do that.
okay.
You can win.
I can do that.
And so.
We need to talk about our staffing.
Yes.
Yes,
before we
please.
hire, but Dan and I will, we talked some today, so, yeah.
Yeah, there's the district will be adding staffing, certificated staffing next year. I mean, at the middle school, like we talked about, they're gonna grow at the middle school. High school is kind of your wild card. It could stay flat, it could even decrease
Well,
next
they're
year.
going to that 4x4
Yeah, I thought we were
schedule
gonna need
and
to
they
hire
asked
three.
to hire
Yeah.
additional.
So, if
certificate.
we're looking at +3 at, probably +3 at elementary, +4 to middle and high school, I'm still a little unclear as far as how many total that's gonna be. You're gonna need to hire teachers.
High school's taking theirs back, and so the hiring's gonna be for the other alternate program.
So
Yes.
when we did that program alone it generates money, doesn't lose it.
Right.
And so there's 2 positions posted for it right now because not having those additional programs, we would lose kids. They don't have options. Middle school, you're just experiencing more kids, but Chris and I will kind of look through that and once we get this plugged in, we'll be able to see where K3 is and the different things, we'll have a better idea of where we're at.
All right, well, the goal for this workshop was to decide on enrollment, and we decided we wanna go up 25. Everybody's in agreement with that, right?
Yes.
Sounds good.
All right,
Thank you for that guidance, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jim.
And so
Make
our
things-
target date would be to have a budget that is ready to sit here by the time we transition that day,
July 1st, right?
July 1st. Yep.
That's what we expect.
Okay. Would-
Yeah,
would-
typically, oh, sorry.
Would now be an appropriate time to inquire about the possibility of divorcing the operations position with the transportation position and having two people instead of combined?
I think, as a board member, you can bring stuff like that up at any time. Chris and I have talked, just so he understands how things are structured. I wouldn't want to venture into that without him heavily involved.
Oh, yeah, he
Because
was
he has
here,
his
that's
own
what, he was here, that's why I was like, it is
Well, we
now an
also have to
appropriate
remember
time.
our workshop is on enrollment,
Okay.
so we're not technically, it's not on our agenda to talk about that, so we need to be careful with that.
So I think having those discussions
That's part of the budget though, too.
are fine, probably not today, but
Okay.
we can, figure out a time when you're here and.
And we are scheduling one-on-ones with Chris for all the board members, so we have
Okay.
time to sit and chat with them, so maybe put that on your list too.
Yeah, we'll have, and then anticipation is the
Pamela will be
first.
scheduling those.
Okay, I see.
First official read of the budget will be in July, at the business meeting in July, and then your second read adoption will be in August. So that's been pretty much past practice. And we need to have a budget publicly available earlier in July.
Yeah,
which we
July
will have.
1st, I think is
Right.
what we want. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
But yeah, we talked a little bit about having